Christina, can I invite you to do your presentation first?
Thank you. Distinguished audience, it's a great honor and pleasure for me to be here in Singapore and to get to know more about your education system and learn from you as well. These two countries, there are some similarities. 5.5 million inhabitants, and these are safe, clean, and well-structured societies. And we don't have too much natural resources except forests in Finland. So education has been the key for the success of both countries. So first of all, I'll speak about some cornerstones of our education system. I think that we have already broken some molds already before, and we make quite many things differently compared to other countries in our education system. It is evidence-based, and we do many things in our own ways. And one very important thing is equality. Equity, equality, and the same opportunities for all the children all over Finland for education. Education is free, warm school lunches every day, and then all the material is free. And the most important thing is to maximize the potential of each child. And it is very important for the individuals and for the whole society to get use of the talents of all the people in the country. And another very important thing in Finland is play. Learning through playing. In kindergartens, it's normal that they learn through playing. We don't want to press children on learning. They need time and space for creativity and innovations. And when you give time for learning through play and learning by doing, then you as well learn to understand things, not only remembering things. So something about the system, early childhood education and care. It is organized by teachers who have got a bachelor, and they are specialized on early childhood education and care. Pre-primary education is for 6 years old, and it's nowadays compulsory. Yet it's not a school. The most important thing is to learn social skills there. But the real school starts at 7, and it's very smooth. Children are different, and about 50% of children can read and write when they start school and the basics of mathematics. Differentiation is very important because children are so different, and flexible grouping is very important. And the first 6 years, the instruction is given by class teachers who have got masters in educational sciences since decades. It has been required, and very strong pedagogical training. And then the 7th, 8th, and 9th grades, the 3 last degrees in basics education, the instruction is given by subject teachers who have got master degree in the subject that they are teaching, and very strong pedagogical training as well. And after 9 years, education, the competition begins. Before that, we don't have national tests. We don't want to compare children. We don't rank the schools. We want to encourage everybody to do their best and find their own talents. And after 9th grade, then the children are chosen, or the young people are chosen on the basis of their outcomes, either to more academic general upper secondary education, and after that education, that 3-year education, they pass the matriculation examination, which is the only national test in Finland. And 50% of students continue that way, and the rest is continuing in vocational upper secondary education and training, where they get some quite practical professions. But it is possible to continue if some students are interested, and if they are doing well, they can go back to this academic studies. So then coming to some specificities in Finland. Teachers are highly trained and they are very appreciated in the Finnish society. And it's every year there are many young people who would like to become teachers, and only 10% of those, 10 of those who apply to the universities to become teachers are chosen. Only 10%, which tells something about the respect of this profession. This has been since always like that, and that is quite exceptional. I know that even in Sweden, our neighbor country, it isn't like that. We focus rather on learning than testing. There is an interesting example. One teacher who had a 5th class, they are 11-year-old, she told me some 2 or 3 years ago that she heard that her class is going to participate to TIMSS. It's an OECD test within some months. And then somehow she felt that she began to prepare the children for that test on mathematics, sciences, and mother tongue. And then finally they found out with the kids that they lost the joy of learning. And somehow when they were preparing for the test, and then it's so important, you learn so many things when you have got space for time and joy of learning, and then you learn much easier when you are motivated. Motivation is a very, very crucial thing. National Board of Education, National Agency for Education gives the National Core Curriculum, which is a framework curriculum, and then municipalities as providers of schooling, they make their own curriculum on that basis. And schools have got very much freedom. Teachers have got very much freedom to choose the methods, textbooks, and other material, partners, and they are making exams on the basis of the objectives, but it is more like encouraging students to do better and know what they have learned. We just made some curriculum reform for basic and upper secondary education, and it's very, very crucial that learners have still more and more active role. One important thing is how to learn, not anymore so much what to learn. So we are focusing much more on how to learn and how learners can be more active. I'm at the board of the French-Finnish School of Helsinki, and there are native French teachers as well and Finnish teachers, and some years ago we had a meeting, so there were just some newcomers from France, 3 new teachers, and I asked them, what are your impressions now, having been here in Helsinki at the French-Finnish School for three weeks? And they said, oh, everything is functioning well, but we are shocked. Why? Because we are used to teach, like having this frontal teaching, like speaking and teaching, but the kids, they were just waiting some instructions that they could then do something, because they were used to learning by doing. And I said, oh, they are so autonomous. And so I said, oh, it's nice to hear, because we don't even realize it, but it's normal in our country. They are autonomous. Already in kindergarten, they learn to that. And then interaction and cooperation. And it's so important that the schools' windows and doors are open to the society, because school is a part of society. And all that you learn out of school, that how you can then apply it in schools, peer learning, and taking into account all that. And then well-being and confidence are as well very, very important things. I just show very quickly, there has been a misunderstanding with subjects. We have still got subjects. It's crucial to have different subjects basing on different sciences, that the children get the understanding of different sciences, research methods, and the language of different sciences. You must have these kinds of structures before understanding that you can better understand the world around of you. Arts and crafts and sports are as well very important, as you can see. It's just to show you something. And then transversal competencies have been introduced just now in the new curriculum. And these are the competencies that are linked with each subject, the objectives of each subject. And the schools decide themselves how to implement, how to conceptualize, how to implement them in schools' reality. And as you see, of course, ICT competencies are very, very important. Multiliteracy, the language of different sciences, and so on. Of course, thinking and learning to learn skills, taking care of oneself and others, and so on. Cultural competence. So, and different subjects, each school must have multidisciplinary models which are so-called phenomenon-based learning methods as well, besides. And then, last but not least, nature is very important for us Finns. We take children in kindergarten, and when they are at school, to the forest. They might have their pets with, or then they are without them, but they are learning so many things: mathematics, mother tongue, sciences, and it's important to have experiential methods and to feel, to have joy of learning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you very much, Christina. So Christina is with the National Agency for Education in Finland, and they set direction for schools, our equivalent of primary schools and secondary schools throughout Finland. And Ben is a disruptor, because he's going to speak about Minerva, which is a for-profit startup university program. Okay, so over to you, Ben.
Okay, thank you. So just a quick correction. Minerva is a for-profit startup built a university system. Our university is actually a non-profit program, which is how we implement it, and we will service other non-profit institutions all over the world. But let me first, let me apologize for my scratchy voice today. I have overcoming a bit of a cold. But let me address the concept of disruption and why is it that universities need to be shaken up. So as we think about it, there are really three broad categories, and what I will hope to convey is an agreement, hopefully by the end of this, as to why universities need to dramatically rethink what they do. And those three are what universities teach, how they teach it, and how they operate. Okay? And we'll talk about each one of these, even though we have a short amount of time. So on the what, it is a relatively straightforward conversation, because it is not a mystery as to what universities should teach. I remember I was meeting a few years ago with a trustee of a very prestigious university in the United States, all of which you know the name of it. I will not repeat it. And this trustee, unprompted by me, said, you know, at our university, we teach students how to think critically. And I said, really? How do you do that? And that was a critical thinking question to a claim. Part of critical thinking is evaluating claims, claim evaluation. Now, in his 30-plus year association with this institution, no one had ever asked him that question, because they assumed that it was a fact. And he was taken aback. And he said, you know, I guess we didn't used to, but now every student in our university takes at least one course in computer science. I said, that's critical thinking? Mm-hmm. And he says, oh, well, I guess not. But now many of our students take at least a course in design thinking. I said, but isn't that creative thinking, not critical thinking? He said, oh, I guess you're right. It's too hard to teach critical thinking. 45 seconds from making a claim that every university in the world makes a claim to realizing that claim is completely and utterly hollow. And in fact, it's not just a personal response. There is a third-party assessment in the United States called the Collegiate Learning Assessment that was developed many years ago to simply measure what universities claim they teach: critical thinking, problem solving, scientific reasoning, written communication skills. These are not controversial concepts. These are things that every educator in higher education, mainly primary and secondary education, claimed as the purpose of those institutions. Turns out, a substantial portion of students in American universities, which, by the way, are still considered by most to be the best in the world, right? Substantial portion have zero gains in their 4 years. Now, just to make it clear, being alive between the ages of 17 to 21 means that you should naturally progress And so for about a third of students in universities, whatever happens at universities actually retards natural growth. Right? And those that do make progress make minimal progress. The institution that we've built, the system that we've built, we've decided to actually give the same assessment to our students. Gave them the beginning of, and the way it's done, it's given at the beginning of the first year and at the end of the fourth year. And you measure progress of the cohort of students across that time frame. We were a little bit anxious, so we gave our students the fourth year test at the end of the first year, just to see what happens with 8 months on a system that actually is built to teach these things. What happens? So it turns out that after 8 months at Minerva, our students not only had the highest composite score in the country compared to universities assessed after 4 years, but far more importantly, the difference, the delta between the beginning test and the end test was the largest this testing organization has seen in its history across any university that has given it across 4 years. 8 months with us produced a bigger effect than any university has been able to demonstrate in history over 4 years. So that's one factor. Second factor, how you teach. Imagine that you were busting up your knee a little bit and you needed to go to the hospital. And the doctor would tell you, you can choose 2 options. Right? We'll give you same doctor, same nurses, same operating room. One technique is about 10% effective. Second technique, 70% effective. Anybody here choose the 10% option? Anybody? Oh, that's good, that's good. So generally, you would like to have the technique that is 7 times more effective at fixing your knee. Now imagine that it is a slightly more important body part. Let's say your brain. And you are going in for brain surgery, which is, by the way, what higher education is. At least what it's supposed to be. And you had to choose between techniques that demonstrated a 90% failure rate after 6 months, which, by the way, is the amount of failure of a traditional lecture test-based class. The vast majority of credits issued at the vast majority of universities, including the vast majority of elite universities in the world. 6 months after the end of a course, only 10% of what students are supposed to have learned actually gets retained. Yet when you transform that class into semi-active learning, same professor, same quality of students, same subject matter, 2 years after the end of the semester, students retain 70% of what they were supposed to learn. This research is decades old. It has been demonstrated, replicated. It has been tested at Harvard, where it actually originally originated, and it was tested in community colleges and everything in between. It was tested in the United States and internationally. It is effectively like the world knows about antibiotics and chooses to use leeches instead to cure bacterial infection. But that's not really fair to leeches, because leeches are 30% effective at curing disease. And so the way in which universities teach is proven scientifically to be broken. And lastly, the way that the university operates, the way it implements. And this is a problem in multiple levels. The first is in the way that education is actually delivered, which is departmental, subject matter oriented. So again, I'll ask you a question, and we'll see if this is universal as others. I assume many of the people in this room work. They employ other people, they work along colleagues. Now imagine that you had to choose between a colleague, an employee, etc. One colleague over here has demonstrated a good subject matter understanding of the fundamentals of economics, biology, history, political science. Let's pick 4 subjects at random. The other candidate that has a good background in various areas, but has really spent much of their time thinking about how to take big problems, break them down into component parts, bring those component parts back together and creative solutions to those problems. Think systemically about what happens in those solutions when entered into an environment and how the environment will modify the intended effects and modify the solution accordingly, and then has learned to communicate and work well with other people in order to implement that solution. Which one of these two would you choose to work with? Anybody choose the first one? Shocking. The entire educational system that we have all over the world trains number 1, not number 2. The entire educational system. Now, why is that? It is because what we refer to as wisdom, which is effectively the process I described, can only be taught to the machines in our heads, the human brain, when it is taught conceptually and cross-contextually. I'll end with getting an understanding of what that means. So when you have an individual that has learned certain habits within a context, a certain level of critical thinking in their field, and they are given general critical thinking assessments that are outside of their contexts, no matter how good of a critical thinker they are in their field, they are not able to transfer that knowledge to anything else. Narrow. Wisdom is not when you go to somebody and you ask for advice and they say, oh, 30 years ago, I faced this exact issue and I know what to do. The nature of work, the nature of society, the nature of what is relied upon us to be effective human beings is to be able to translate what we've learned from various aspects of our lives into new contexts. And the only way to deliver that education, again, empirically shown, demonstrated, researched, is to break down, much like this concept of evaluating claims, which is a multifaceted aspect of critical thinking, even though there are many other aspects of critical thinking. Break down each one of those component parts and make sure that in a curriculum, which is largely absent, certainly general education for most universities in the world, and in a curriculum, these concepts are introduced, contextualized, and recontextualized until the generalizable understanding can transform your brain. So imagine, in short, if there was a system that could actually deliver wisdom to 20-year-olds. What would the world look like today if that happened all over the world?
Thank you. All right, thank you, Ben. All right, now it's your turn. I hope you're going to participate because it's your time to interact with our two speakers. And we have the mics. Please come up to the mics and introduce yourselves and pose your questions.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to say a few words.
Good morning.
This morning has been very interesting for me because I have some memory of how Singapore's education system, at least at the tertiary level, was disrupted in a dramatic way. So Drexel University, not too far away from UPenn, approached me and said that we need you to advise us on creative thinking and all of that. So Drexel then became the first university in the world to introduce a bachelor's in creativity, a master's in creativity, and a PhD in creativity. We could have done that. We in Singapore could have been the first to have realized that. But we are always waiting for others to do it. It's our casuism, right? Our worry that we may be proven wrong. But if we wait too long to be proven right, we are always going to end up copying and being imitators. That's the whole point about this following of benchmark. All right, where do you benchmark against? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, that was Professor Kapal Singh from Singapore Management University. Would either of you like to, Christina, would you like to respond to what he had to say about disruptive forces and also creative thinking, which I think is what you try to teach in the Finnish system, but I think you also mentioned to me that harmony is something that you value in Finland, and how do you reconcile, the disruptive impact of certain types of teaching with that?
Yes, it is important to give space for the childhood, for children, and then at the same time face the changes in the world around of children. And of course, when you have got time, it is as well important for creativity. You can't create anything if you don't have any space for that. But of course, besides, it's very important to learn important things, knowledge, and then important and skills, which is more and more important to learn skills.
Yes.
And then how to apply all that you have learned in different situations, in different occasions, as you mentioned as well. This is really crucial.
I'll give a very controversial advice, as I tend to do. I'll give you a little bit of context. I've been in the internet world for a long time, ever since really the commercial internet started. And one of my previous companies that I ran was bought by a very large technology company. And they were always amazed at what we could do, and they said, we want to innovate, right? How do we innovate? How do we learn from you, et cetera? And my answer to them was don't. Because if you try to innovate, as they had for decades, you will fail. You'll always fail. Because innovation does not come from within. It doesn't happen. When you innovate, it just won't work well. Because you may offer the bachelor's or master's or PhD, but eventually the screws will tighten. Eventually things will be suboptimal, so things will fail. Instead, you should copy, right? But you should copy fast, right? Because, Minerva could never have been born within an existing institution. There's no way. The system had to be created outside. But now, you see the results. You see the results. Order of magnitude better than any university in the world. Copy. Steal shamelessly. We have a book. Pay $30. Read it. Build it. But if you try to go into the same situation and you go back to your faculty senate in the same process, again, in the United States, I assume this is similar in Singapore, in the United States, universities have a curriculum committee every decade. Every decade, every university in the country has a curriculum committee. And every decade, there's a new curriculum that comes out. And a year after it comes out, everybody says, this is worse than what we did before.
Anyway, that's too slow, right? 10 years is like an eternity today. Okay, do we have any more questions? Actually, if you could just come up to the mics, because we don't have much time, maybe only just 20 minutes left. If you could just come up to the mics and pose your questions, and we could actually take more than one at the same time. Okay, this lady, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Good morning, everyone. My name is Denise Pang from the Academy for Mastery. Christina, you mentioned that the Finnish system chooses only 10% of all the applicants to be teachers. And in Minerva, I'm sure you're very selective in terms of your faculty. What do you look out for? As potential teachers or educators come to you, what are some of the key elements, all things being equal, that differentiates them? Thank you.
Thank you. Great question. Christina.
Yeah, this is a good question. I'm not working in teacher at the university, but it's true that they have got some tests, and they must have, first of all, enough knowledge. They must have good results from the matriculation examination. And then, of course, they have got psychological tests, so that they must be right type of persons, flexible enough, and then they must have communication skills and many kinds of psychological, very important skills that they are going to need in their future work. So, but it takes about 2 to 3 days, these tests for those coming teachers. But I'm sorry, I can't tell more about it because that is not my my expertise. So.
Okay, thank you.
So I can give you a sense, which is actually an interesting quick history lesson about the professoriate at universities. We hire the kinds of professors that would have been highly sought after maybe 60 or 70 years ago, maybe even 30 or 40 years ago, but that today are very much in the minority in higher education. So today, the primary goal of a researcher, a university professor, is to focus on a very narrow specialty, right? And so there's this a phrase that says, university professors need to know more and more about less and less, right? So you have to be the world's foremost expert on some subcellular mechanism, and you spend 40 years focusing just on that. And so that means that professors are generally quite narrow and have high rigid intelligence. They have a thesis, they defend it, they go and research it, and when the competitor scientist or competitor researcher says, your theory is wrong, your job is to prove why that scientist is incorrect. When my father started in science 60 years ago, he's today a structural biologist. Before that, he was a molecular biologist. Before that, he was a biochemist. Before that, he was a biologist. And the reason that he kept changing is because those fields didn't exist. And molecular biologists or structural biologists of his era couldn't be narrow because they had to know science broadly. They had to understand physics and chemistry. And so they were, rather than being narrow, they had to be extraordinarily broad, and they had to have very high fluid intelligence. It turns out that those characteristics are far, far, far better for a teacher than the narrow and rigid intelligence kind is.
Thank you.
So that's what we choose.
Thanks. Thank you very much, both of you. And sir, would you like to introduce yourself and ask your question, please?
Thank you, panel. I'm a practicing engineer. My name is Liu, and I'm also an associate lecturer. In fact, I've been involved and in education for more than 30 years, although I'm still a practicing engineer. So whatever I practice in a day, I share with our students and my real life. Thank you very much. In fact, I'm here and very glad to hear from the Finnish education that you have this thing, one very important word I always imbue all my students, my interns in my office, is this 4-letter word called C-A-R-E. And you have that word, and I saw it in your slide. And care is most important in our education. Care is more powerful than the other 4-letter word called C-U-R-E, cure. Without care, whatever cure you want is useless. Next, I just want to say I come here specifically to listen to Ben because I want to learn from him differently. Why? Because I had tried teaching my students almost 5 years ago with a new course to teach them differently. And I'm trying to see how disruption can really take root or even transform disruption before disruption creates eruption to our society, to our employment, where our minister will have to take care in the future, and perhaps even corruption in the society because they are out of job. So Ben, I'm very happy to hear from you, and I'd like to just share very quickly, I hope the session here do not mind, that when I was teaching them differently, I told my students that I'm going to give you a lectorial after my class. Please fill up 1 page of what you learned today. Fill it up as much as possible. Do whatever you want to do. Write whatever you want to write on those any topics you can. That's all. Before I could get out of the class, there was already eruption. Commotion. Why? They came back to me, Dr. Liu, how many words must I put in? Dr. Liu, how about the margin? Is it 1 inch or 2 inch? What sort of font am I going to do? They are not used to working out of the box. And I did specifically say, do anything out of the box. In fact, I did say, the box is porous. You can peep through the box and do anything. But they are lost. So this is what I'm trying to share. And I did this without the permission of RMIT or SIM. So far, the students have submitted many, maybe 50 to 100 of this 1 page. so-called lectorial to me. And until today, I have not seen any paper, all came in white color, none has come in black color. And I have, up to now, never received any complaint yet that Dr. Liu is teaching something we are very misguided. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Liu. Yes, ma'am, do you have a question? Would you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Kirtida Mekani, and I'm involved in business, education, arts, and the environment. So it's a multifaceted approach. My question is that Christina mentioned about nature, and I'm a strong believer that a lot of learning happens when we are connected with nature. And we've set up the biomimicry network. It's mimicking nature. Ben, I like the idea of copying. 3.8 million years we have nature at our disposal. The plant kingdom, the animal kingdom has thrived, sustained, and survived. We need to learn a lot from them. And a lot of inspiration for all the innovations have come from nature. Be it the leaf was an inspiration for the solar panel. The kingfisher gave us the bullet train. So a lot of answers are already hidden there, available. And why we here in Singapore or here are not looking at nature for our answers. Nature is at our disposal, right at our doorstep. And sometimes we feel that we want people to come and innovate, and we want scientists coming in and creativity. But if we don't nurture it right from the very beginning, and if we don't have kids having that curiosity, observational skills, and asking questions, taking an idea from nature and transferring it, it's not going to happen. All of a sudden, there's not going to be something that, you're a scientist overnight. But all our eureka moments come from seeing something which is so well designed in nature and has sustained. My eureka moment was from a composting pit when I was in a primary school. So these are kind of things where we have to get our kids in nature to see things, absorb nature, and take these ideas. So what I'm asking both of you is, can you give me a little more elaboration on that? And what do you think about mimicking nature and solving our problems and sustaining ourselves in this bigger picture?
You mean you wanted to know about solving problems and in nature?
Learning from nature.
Yeah.
Learning from nature and what young people, you could talk about what young people you think have learned from nature.
They can learn many kinds of things there, and then they can bring things that they have experienced in the nature in the classroom, and then go more profoundly on those problems, for example, or questions that they have then seen there in the nature. And there are many opportunities. It is the teachers can choose them how to use the knowledge and everything they have experienced there.
How do teachers in Finland facilitate learning through nature? I mean, obviously they take the children out to a natural area. Then how does the learning happen?
It depends, but very often you learn very many things. It's kind of seeing many kinds of phenomenon there, and so learning about climate, learning about all the plants that there are, all the trees, forests, picking berries or mushrooms like in the picture, and learning about those as well at the same time. And then they can count there. Little children go into the forest and they are counting trees and whatever. They are learning mathematics in that way. Or then they have got physical training there. They have got some things there, what they are doing, and they are running there, and so many kinds of things that they can do. A history, they can then observe there might be some areas where there are historical sites and in the nature and how people used to live before and about the culture, so many kinds of things. And we have got special nature schools as well. So they are offering these kinds of services for schools, or then you just take kids into the forest, but of course they are always planned. What are the objectives and what things would be taught or learned there in the nature. So there are many ways for that.
Yes.
I think what was fascinating
Yes.
is that you gave a great example of FAR transfer, right? And FAR transfer is the concept of multi-contextual conceptual application. So the way I learned about FAR transfer was by being brought up by scientists. And they're very politically aware and active. and I'm Israeli. I grew up in Israel, and in Israel there's a strange habit of talking to inanimate objects like televisions. And so during political debates or shows, my parents would be talking at the television and basically making political predictions using Newtonian physics and looking at principles of conservation of energy and things like that to say about what would happen in the future. And we did the same types of conversations at dinner parties. And most of our guests thought my parents were completely out of their minds. Turns out their predictions were the ones that came true, right? And when you have the ability to learn transferable elements, whether it be from nature, from commerce, from really any field, right? The ability to transfer from context to context is crucial.
Okay, thank you. Actually, we can only take one more question. So,
Yes, the word care is important, and all my interns and engineers, they come to my office, they must plant a seed to grow in my office. If not, they'll be sacked. I
Okay.
said, you must learn from the plant, and
All right.
learning from plant is very important.
thank
Seed
you very
for
much.
life. Thank you.
Okay, we have two more questions over there. Please introduce yourself.
Good morning, I'm Daryl. Ben, you shared about the trustee who talked about critical thinking. I'm surprised he didn't ask you back what is critical thinking and how do you teach it?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's my question actually. How would you teach critical thinking and how would that look differently in a mainstream school?
Can we take the other question as well?
Hi, my name is Angela. I'm a final year student at Yale and US College here in Singapore, which is also, I think, an institution that would consider itself disruptive in the education landscape. So my question is to Ben. You spoke a lot about teaching students how to problem solve, especially across fields. But I think it's an important thing to consider, like, we are solving problems to what ends? Because problem solving can mean anything. I can go problem solve for the North Korean regime. And so my question is about how education, and particularly a model like Minerva, which I think has a reputation of being quite elite, how such education models can teach responsible citizenship and ethics.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely. So actually, related questions, which is good. The way that you teach things like critical thinking, creative thinking, problem solving, things like that, is to first and foremost realize that those things don't exist. They're fictitious constructions. So you cannot teach critical thinking because critical thinking is not a thing. You can't teach problem solving because problem solving is not a thing. They're a combination of many heterogeneous things, right? So for example, I gave the example before of evaluating claims. Claim evaluation, fake news evaluation, or news evaluation in general is a component of critical thinking. But there are different ways to evaluate claims. Sometimes you use logic. Sometimes you use reasoning, which is different than logic. Sometimes you think about counterclaims. Sometimes you use statistical analyses. And so you break down those areas into component parts. And then you're aware that there are other forms of critical thinking. So for example, making decision trade-offs. Right? Should I take path 1 or path 2? Now that's a very different process with very different subcomponents than claim evaluation. Same thing with problem solving. Problem solving isn't about, let's solve a problem, right? It's actually breaking down. So first and foremost, you start by thinking about purpose, right? What is the purpose that you're trying to get to by solving a problem? Then we teach about the concept of what is the problem you're actually trying to solve. This concept of right problem. Now this sounds absurd. Who would solve problems that aren't the right problems? Turns out the vast majority of human beings don't understand right problem. They don't understand what it is they're trying to solve before they start solving. Because they don't go through systemically and think about things. Now, ethical frameworks are part of that, except that when you teach ethical frameworks as ethical frameworks, you wind up not producing ethically minded students. Why? Because they're imposed systems. They're somebody else's belief. And it doesn't matter if, like Yale and US will say, and we look at Eastern and Western. Okay, well, why just those two, right? Why not, a bunch of others? So instead, go into component parts. Teach systems. Teach interaction effects. I make a decision. How does it impact the system? How does it come back to me? How does it tie to incentives? So when you teach systemically, lo and behold, karma actually exists, right?
Okay. Christina, would you like to just speak briefly about your approach towards teaching critical thinking in Finland?
Well, critical thinking skills are very, very important, and of course, it is very crucial to teach those things, and especially in history. History teaching, like sources or media, critical media thinking about media. It is true that it's always connected to the context when you are teaching those things, and it is so difficult today to somehow to know what is the truth. For example, if you think about critical thinking and media and all the things we hear and see, but it is very, very important that children learn many things and to understand that there are many kinds of perspectives on certain issues and how they can think themselves, and ethical things are as well very, very important. But it becomes from the values. It comes from the values. They have this how you think about ethics and the context as well. But it is as well through religion. We have got religion teaching in schools, and then ethics and for example, history, social studies, which are very important, active participation and knowing about societies, about participating and influencing, being active citizens, and understanding the disrupted world around of us. It's very, very important today, more and more important.
Let me just add one more thing, which I think is probably the most crucial thing that I forgot to address about both how you teach critical thinking and ethics and things like that. Again, one of the major problems of educational systems is that they teach a subject, right? So you say, I went to Wharton, and in Wharton, you have to take an ethics class. If you think Wharton graduates are more ethical than typical university graduates, I got a lot of things to sell you, right? It doesn't work. And the reason is that when you try to teach ethics or critical thinking in this context over here, and then you say, oh, and then you get to do your subject matter, etc., the brain doesn't transfer.
That's right.
It's a problem of transference. And so instead, the way we build our curriculum is we introduce these subcomponent concepts, right? Not these high-level, but actual analytical components. We think ethics is a natural outcome of good analysis. But then you get evaluated on how you apply every single one of these components to every single subject you take. And so the scaffolding in the curriculum is actually what makes the brain surgery work. Otherwise, you're just teaching and people will forget and not apply.
Okay, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this panel. I'd like to thank Christina and Ben very much, and thank all of you for your questions. And we have to move on to our next panel now. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you, Christina.